Hi friends, welcome to Chandra Chess Academy. Today we are going to continue our lesson how to avoid opening traps from black side. Last week we have discussed avoiding the opening traps from white side, where I have suggested b3 and g3 for all the beginners. So today also we are going to choose something which is not very familiar and yet a strong opening from black, where you can apply the same opening for any move from white. So isn't it cool? So let's begin the session. Okay, here you can see the stats which I picked up from Opening Explorer. See, for e4, which is one of the most common moves from white, so the most familiar responses for e4 is c5 and e5. So you can see c5, which is Sicilian opening, more than 5,62,000 games are there with c5, and when you see e5 also more than 2,68,000 games are there with e5. So you can say c5 and e5 are the most common replies to e4, so which forms 90% of the games. So again here we need to choose something that is a bit unusual and at the same time a strong and a flexible opening, which gives you enough room to play your original game and positional chess as well. Here you can see d4, another common opening move from white. Even for d4, the most common replies are knight f6 or d5. These are the top two replies. So for here I'm going to suggest you one opening which you can apply for actually any move. Actually any move from white you can play. See here against e4 we have g6, which is ranking 6th here. Here we are avoiding again the top 5 openings, so we are choosing the 6th one from the table. That means very few people, not more than 2% people play it, so which makes it easier for you to work on it, because it is very rare that your opponent will come out with a strategy or any opening traps on this opening, because he has to focus more on the e5 or c5, as they are the most common replies from black. It is very difficult for someone to go down into the table and look for some unusual opening and prepare against it. So it is always makes sense to choose an opening that is less familiar to your opponent and yet gives you a solid position to play the middle game. So be practical when you are choosing your openings. You cannot expect to win the game during the first 10-15 moves. The purpose of a opening is to give you a playable middle game position. So don't be carried away by watching the YouTube videos where you see opening tricks and traps to which claim to get you win the games within the 10-15 moves. So that is practically not possible. I'm not talking about national or international level. Even at a very beginning level, like in a district or state level also, people are aware of all the opening tricks and traps, so which is not going to work when you play with the real chess players. So instead focus on improving your game. Choose your openings wisely, which do not lead to complicated positions. Simplify it, where you do not have to spend much time reading the theory. So for that very purpose I'm suggesting you the openings, like in previous session where I suggested only 2 openings for whites. So similarly in this session also I'm going to suggest you just one opening, which is enough to play against any move from white. So here again for e4, d4 or c4, any move from white, you can actually defend the game with g6. The only exception to this opening is when white plays b3 and bishop b2, you cannot play that g6 and bishop g7 move, because the bishop will take your bishop on g7. Let's look at the following game played between Jose Fernando and Magnus Carlsen. Carlsen was playing blacks here. He applied this modern defense. So you can know when Carlsen is playing it, it's not just a time pass opening. You can actually rely on it. Yeah, just remember the pawn structure. Here it is simple. Virtually any reply from white, you can just follow these move order. So we're done with our opening actually. So yeah, actually within the 7 moves our opening portion of the game is completed. We got our knights developed, bishops developed, we have castled, and we have made only 3 pawn moves. So actually the key pawn moves here are d6 and g6. You should remember, because this is going to be the same pawn structure against any move from white. Here white started the game with e4. So even if he starts the game with d4 or something else, you can still rely on this pawn structure and this move order. In fact, the move order also here doesn't matter. You can sometimes open the game with d6 or sometimes open the game with knight f6, but at the end you need to get this position: the pawn on g6, the pawn on d6, knight on f6, bishop on g7, and then castle. That's it. This is the basic structure of this opening. It is called the modern defense. Let's see one more game where white starts the game with d4. Actually, it doesn't change much whether he plays e4 or d4. We can still get the same position. Here white starts the game with d4. Again black replies with g6. Against e4 we have the d6 move is important here. Whenever white plays e4, we play d6 in order to prevent the e4 pawn from reaching the e5 square. So that is the secret behind this d6 move here. Okay, for knight f3 we have knight f6, e3, bishop g7. So in fact, any move from white you can follow this move order. We start with g6, d6, knight f3, knight f6, sorry, bishop g7, and castle. So again, within 7 moves we are done with our opening. So isn't it cool that there is an opening which you can play against any move from white, and it is not very difficult to remember or not very difficult to understand. It is very simple. The basic pawn structure in this opening is your g6, d6, and then you fancy to your dark squared bishop and castle. That's it. See the pawn structure, I'll show you. It is very easy to remember. In fact, how we played against e4. We have two pawns, the important pawns, one on g6 and another one on d6, and we have the bishop on g7, knight on f6, and then we have castle. This is how the pawn structure and piece placement looked when white played e4. Let's see how we have responded when white played d4. See, this is it. Again we have the same two important pawns, that one pawn on g6, another pawn on d6. We have again our bishop on g7 and knight on f6, and we have castled. So these are the important pawn structure and piece placement when it comes to the modern defense. So when you can play it against d4 and e4, you can actually apply it against any move from white. So this actually saves a lot of time in getting ready for the tournament when your opponent is very good against all familiar responses against e4 like e5 and c5, and when you surprise him with something like g6, and it really frustrates your opponent because he comes a lot prepared for Sicilian or French defense or other familiar lines with e5. So when you surprise him with g6, it really gets frustrated because he spent a lot of time learning the c5 and e5 lines. So generally you can ask any of your chess friends, they've spent years together on learning the opening itself. So isn't it cool that our opening repertoire is set in just 2 sessions? We have had only 2 openings, one from whites and one from blacks, but still we can play against anyone and against any opening. If you want to explore more about this opening, you can refer to this book, The Modern Defense Move by Move series. In fact, the Everyman Chess Move by Move series are good for all the beginners. And now we are ready for the most interesting phase of the game, that is the middle game, and followed by the end game. So which are more important and more interesting? The real chess begins in middle game and end game. Opening is more of surviving or taking the game to the next level with a very good playable position. So but unfortunately many people get stuck at learning the openings itself. Actually the 80% of the coaches encourage their students to learn or by heart the openings at the beginning level itself, which is not an advisable thing, because when you start following something or just by hearting things, you are tuning your mind to just follow the existing theory. You are not training your mind to try something new on your own and invent something instead of following the age-old theory. Why don't you try and invent something new? So the game of chess needs some new contributions. It's not the we don't need followers to. So the openings that I suggested encourages kids to think on their own instead of following the existing theory. They can start thinking on their own and build their strategy, play more of positional chess, which is actually good for their game in the long run. So if you do like our videos, do subscribe and keep watching. Okay, that's it for today. Next week we'll start with our middle game lessons. Thank you for subscribing to our channel, Ramachandra Chess Academy. Thank you.